The secret love of the Mafia boss, hidden in the arms of another life. Chapter 1. The winter he found her. He had learned to live in silence. To command men without raising his voice. To make the world obey him with nothing but a look. His name was Leonardo Moretti, known across the underworld as Il Lupo, the Wolf. And like the wolf, he had long since forgotten what warmth felt like. It was winter in Palermo, the kind of winter that seemed to punish even the living. A cold rain fell without mercy, washing the streets clean of color, leaving behind only steel and shadow. Leonardo drove alone that night. No guards. No convoy. Just him, and the sound of the storm roaring above the city he owned. He wasn't supposed to be there. Not in that part of town. But fate never cared for rules written by men like him. On the side of the deserted road, through the blur of the rain, he saw it. A small car crashed into the guardrail. A flicker of light from a broken headlamp. He slowed down. Inside, he saw a woman, unconscious, her face pale, lips trembling from the cold. Blood ran down her forehead, mingling with rainwater. He hesitated only for a second. Then, the man who had ordered 100 deaths opened her door and carried her out with trembling hands. In his mansion by the coast, the silence was so deep it hurt to break it. He laid her down on the leather couch, the fire flickering weakly nearby. "Bring towels. Hot water. And call Dr. Fiore," he ordered his butler. When the doctor left, hours later, Leonardo stayed by her side, watching the rise and fall of her breathing. She was young, maybe 25. Her name, according to her ID, was Elena Romano. A nurse. He should have sent her away. People who entered his world rarely left it alive. But something about her, maybe the way her hand reached out in her sleep, as if searching for safety, anchored him to that chair. For the first time in years, Leonardo didn't think about territory, power, or vengeance. He thought about the sound of her heartbeat. Morning came slow, pale through the glass. Elena opened her eyes, confusion clouding them. "Where am I?" she whispered. "You're safe," he said softly, his voice rough from sleeplessness. "You were in an accident. I found you." She tried to sit up but winced in pain. "Who are you?" He paused, long enough for the question to feel heavy. "Someone who doesn't sleep well," he replied. Her lips curved into a faint, confused smile. Days passed. The storm outside faded, but inside the villa, another kind of storm began to grow, quiet, human, dangerous. Elena helped clean her own bandages, refusing to be treated like a guest. She wandered the house, touching paintings, staring out at the endless sea. "Why do you live in a house with no music?" she asked one evening. "Because silence is safer," he answered. But the next morning, she found a piano in the living room. Old, covered in dust, but tuned perfectly. When she played, the notes echoed through the stone halls like whispers of a forgotten soul. Leonardo listened from the shadows. Her music hurt him, because it reminded him of everything he'd buried. On the fourth night, she caught him watching. "You saved me," she said softly. He looked away, almost ashamed. "Maybe I was saving myself," he murmured. She frowned. "What does that mean?" He didn't answer. Instead, he stood, walked to the window, and stared at the storm rolling in again. "The world I live in," he said finally, "doesn't allow me to feel much. When I do, someone pays the price." "You talk like a man already dead," she said gently. He smiled, the saddest smile she'd ever seen. "Maybe I am." That night, she couldn't sleep. Something about him haunted her. The quiet, the restraint, the flicker of something human behind the mask of a killer. She found him outside near the cliffs, cigarette glowing faintly in the wind. "I can't rest knowing you're out here," she said. "Then stay," he replied, not turning. "But don't ask me questions I can't answer." She didn't. Instead, she stood beside him, watching waves crash far below. Their shoulders almost touched. And in that fragile silence, two worlds, light and dark, found a moment's peace. A few days later, when her strength returned, she prepared to leave. "You don't owe me anything," he said quietly, handing her a coat. "I owe you my life," she replied. Then live it far from here. She looked at him, at the walls, the guards, the emptiness he called home. Do you ever wish for something different? His jaw tightened. Wishing is dangerous for men like me. She reached out, touched his hand. Then maybe it's time you learned how. For a brief second, he held her fingers, warm against his cold skin. Then he let go. That evening, he found a note in the music room. Elena had left before dawn, but on the piano, she'd placed a single white rose and a folded piece of paper. Thank you for saving me. If you ever decide to find peace, I hope it leads you to music again. He stood there for a long time, staring at the note. The rose trembled in his hand. He placed it on the piano and whispered to the empty room. You already were the peace I never deserved. 3 weeks passed since Elena left. For Leonardo, each morning arrived like a ghost, gray, quiet, and meaningless. Her absence lingered in every hallway, in the untouched piano, in the air itself. The house that once felt like a fortress now felt like a tomb. And he its keeper. One night, as the moonlight spilled across the marble floor, a familiar sound broke the silence. The doorbell. He froze. Nobody rang the bell in his world. They knocked, or they didn't live to. He opened the door. And there she was. Elena, trembling in the cold, clutching a small bag. Her eyes red from crying. I had nowhere else to go, she whispered. My apartment was broken into. They took everything. I didn't know who else to trust. Leonardo stepped aside without a word. Inside, she collapsed into a chair, exhausted. He poured her a glass of water, watching her hands shake. I shouldn't have come, she said softly. You shouldn't have, he replied. And yet, his eyes softened. But I'm glad you did. Days turned to weeks again. Elena stayed, this time not as a guest, but as a quiet presence, a kind light inside the darkness. She cooked, she cleaned, she tended to the wounded soldiers of his world when they arrived late at night. And she never asked questions. One morning, she found him in his office, staring at a file. Photos of men. Blood. Does it ever end? She asked quietly. He didn't look up. It ends when I do. She stepped closer, gently touching the file, closing it. Maybe it can end sooner, she said. He met her eyes, and for the first time, didn't have an answer. That evening, she followed him to the back of the property, a small shed hidden behind the vineyards. Inside were children. 6 of them, between 5 and 12. Orphans. They called him Signor Lupo. He brought them food, clothes, books, in secret. They're the ones left behind when men like me settle scores, he said quietly. I keep them safe. It's the only part of my life that still feels human. Elena watched him kneel to tie a boy's shoe, his hands, the same hands that once pulled a trigger, trembling slightly. I think you're more human than you let yourself believe, she whispered. He smiled faintly. Don't mistake guilt for kindness. Weeks turned to months. Spring came. The villa, once lifeless, began to breathe again. Music, laughter, the sound of Elena humming as she cooked. The men who worked for Leonardo noticed the change. The boss smiled more. He gave fewer orders, spent more time by the sea. And at night, sometimes, soft piano notes would echo through the halls, a duet between him and her. It was a fragile sanctuary, and both of them knew it could shatter at any moment. One night, a storm rolled in. Thunder cracked across the sky, and the power went out. Elena found Leonardo outside, drenched, watching lightning flash over the horizon. You should be inside, she said. I can't sleep when it rains, he murmured. It reminds me of the night I found you. She stepped closer. So, you only remember the storm? He turned, eyes burning through the rain. No. I remember you. For a moment, they stood there, 2 souls who didn't belong to the same world, but somehow found each other anyway. She reached for his face, brushing away a drop of rain, or maybe a tear. And he didn't move. Their lips met quietly as the storm raged around them. The kiss was not passion, it was surrender. In the weeks that followed, something unspoken grew between them. They didn't talk about love. They didn't need to. He began to tell her pieces of his past, A father who ruled with fists, a brother murdered by rivals, a life shaped by vengeance. She listened, never judging. And when he stopped speaking, she would rest her hand on his chest and say softly, "You don't have to carry it alone anymore." He wanted to believe her. But deep inside, Leonardo knew, his world had never allowed second chances. The fragile peace shattered one night when a man named Marco Santini, his second in command, walked into the study unannounced. He saw Elena sitting there, reading beside the fire. He frowned. "Since when do we let civilians stay here?" he asked. Leonardo didn't look up. "Since I said so." Marco's jaw tightened. "You're changing, boss. She's making you weak." Leonardo's voice turned cold. "Careful, Marco. You're standing very close to the line." But Marco didn't stop. He leaned closer, whispering, "You think you can live in two worlds, Leonardo? You can't. Sooner or later, one will destroy the other." Leonardo's hand clenched on the glass he was holding, until it shattered. Elena rose silently and left the room, her heart pounding. That night, Leonardo sat alone in the dark, blood still fresh on his palm. He thought of her, the way she smiled, the way she saw good where there was none. He whispered to himself, "If I ever lose her, it won't be to an enemy. It will be to the truth." Outside, the waves crashed harder. And in the distance, a storm gathered over Palermo once more. The following months brought both peace and whispers. To the outside world, Leonardo Moretti remained Il Lupo, the man who ruled Palermo's underground with a silent hand and a merciless heart. But within the walls of the coastal villa, he was someone else, someone even he did not recognize. He laughed. He listened to music. He dreamed of a life where his hands were clean. And that, for men like him, was the first step toward ruin. Marco Santini saw it long before Leonardo did. From the shadows, he watched his boss soften, hesitate, smile too easily. He saw Elena's light growing inside the villa like a flame, one that could burn the entire empire down. "Love," Marco muttered, staring out over the city lights, "is a luxury our kind can't afford." So he made a choice. A quiet phone call. A whispered meeting with men from the rival Bellini family. And in that single night, the seeds of betrayal were sown. Back at the villa, Elena sensed something changing. The guards were restless. The phone rang more often. Leonardo had become distant again, not cruel, but heavy, burdened. She found him one night sitting in his office, staring at a photo of his younger brother, a boy with the same gray eyes, frozen in time. "I never told you about him," Leonardo said quietly. "He was 16 when they took him. The Bellinis sent a message, a bullet in a box. That was the day I became Il Lupo." Elena's throat tightened. "And what did it cost you?" she asked. He looked up, and for the first time, his eyes shimmered. Everything that was human. She took his hand, trembling. "Then maybe, it's time to take it back." He wanted to believe her. He almost did. But fate was already moving. 3 days later, one of his warehouses burned to the ground. 2 of his men vanished. And on the 4th night, gunfire echoed through the city streets. The war he had kept at bay was breaking loose again. Marco stood by his side in the strategy room, pretending loyalty, his voice steady. "It's the Bellinis. They want blood. We strike first." Leonardo nodded, eyes cold. "No. We find who opened the door for them." Marco's jaw tightened. "Are you accusing me?" Leonardo didn't answer, and silence can wound deeper than words. That night, he returned to the villa, exhausted. Elena was waiting, eyes full of worry. "You're hurt," she said, seeing the bruise on his jaw. "It's nothing. You're lying." He smirked faintly. "I do that for a living." She stepped closer. "Then stop lying to me at least." He sighed, the sound of a man trapped between worlds. "I can't. The truth would only make you hate me." "Try me," she said softly. He met her gaze, and for the first time, let a piece of the darkness slip through. "I've killed men, Elena. Not monsters. Some deserved it. Some didn't. And every time I close my eyes, I see them again." She reached up, touching his cheek. "Then you live with ghosts?" she whispered. But ghosts can't win if you choose the living. Her words sank deep, too deep. Because in that moment he realized how much she meant to him. And that meant she had become his greatest weakness. 2 weeks later, Leonardo took her away, far from Palermo, to a villa in the countryside surrounded by vineyards and quiet hills. He told her it was for her safety. He didn't say it was because he could no longer sleep, fearing what might happen if she stayed close to his world. "I'll come back for you when it's over," he promised, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "And if it never ends?" she asked. "Then you'll never know what happened to me," he said quietly. "But you'll be safe." She pressed something into his palm, a small pendant, a silver cross. "Then you keep this," she said. "So I'll know you're still fighting for something good." He smiled, kissed her forehead, and walked away, leaving his heart behind. Back in Palermo, Marco made his final move. He met with the Bellinis again, promising information, routes, guards, times. In return, they promised him power. But betrayal has a scent. And Leonardo, the wolf, could smell it even in the dark. That night, in a warehouse on the docks, he confronted Marco alone. The moonlight spilled through broken glass as Leonardo's voice echoed, cold and steady. "You sold me out." Marco's hand hovered near his gun. "I did what you couldn't. You've gone soft, Leo. A woman made you weak." Leonardo stepped forward. "She made me remember I was still a man." Marco drew his weapon, but Leonardo was faster. One shot. Then silence. He stared at his old friend's body for a long time, whispering, "You could have walked away." But nobody walks away from the life they built on blood. By dawn, the streets were quiet again. But inside Leonardo's chest, there was no victory, only the hollow ache of everything he had lost. He drove through the night, rain streaking across the windshield, until he reached the countryside. When he opened the villa door, the rooms were empty. Elena was gone. On the piano, he found a letter, folded, simple, written in her careful hand. "I can't live in your world, Leonardo. I've seen the pain it brings, and I can't be part of it. I love you, but love is not enough to stop the blood. Please, don't look for me." The pendant was beside it, the silver cross she had given him. He held it tightly until the chain broke in his hand. That night, he stood alone by the sea, the waves crashing against the rocks below. He whispered to the wind, "If I love you, I'll let you go." And somewhere far away, beneath the same moon, Elena whispered the same words into the dark. For days after Elena's disappearance, Leonardo wandered the villa like a ghost who had forgotten where he died. Every room echoed with her laughter, every shadow whispered her name. He replayed the last time he'd held her hand, the softness, the way her fingers lingered as if part of her already knew it would be the last time. He tried to find her. He sent men, asked questions, followed trails. But every road led to nothing. It was as if she had dissolved into air. And maybe that was her only way to survive. One night, sitting at the piano she used to play, he finally took a pen. The ink bled slowly across the page, each word cutting deeper than any knife could. "Elena, I could spend a lifetime searching for you, but the truth is I have already found you, inside every silence I keep. If I love you, I must let you go. Because my world kills everything pure. I will not let it kill you." He folded the letter and placed it beneath the silver cross she had left behind. For a long time, he stared at it, the symbol of both mercy and punishment. Then he whispered, "Amen," and walked away. He left Palermo that night. No guards, no car, no farewell. Only the sound of his footsteps disappearing into the rain. His men searched for him for weeks, but Il Lupo was gone. Some said he fled to Spain. Others claimed he was dead. No one knew that Leonardo Moretti had buried himself alive, inside another name. 5 years passed. The world moved on. The Mafia families shifted, rose, and fell like tides. And in a small Tuscan village, life bloomed quietly, far from the noise of war. Elena lived there, in a sun-washed house surrounded by olive trees. Her hair was shorter now, her eyes calmer, though sadness still lived behind them like an old photograph. Each morning she walked to the local clinic, where she worked as a nurse. To her patients, she was simply Signor Romano, gentle, patient, always smiling. No one knew her story. No one asked. And at home, waiting for her after each shift, was a boy with silver-gray eyes. His name was Luca. 5 years old. Curious, brilliant, and impossibly kind. He loved drawing wolves. When Elena asked why, he always said, "Because they look lonely but strong." Sometimes, when he slept, she sat beside him and traced the outline of his cheek, whispering, "You have his eyes, mio piccolo." She had never told him who his father was. Some truths were too dangerous, even in peace. One afternoon, while cleaning, she found the letter again, the one Leonardo had written before disappearing. The paper was yellowed, the ink faded, but the words still burned. She pressed it to her heart, whispering, "You were wrong, Leo. Love didn't die. It just changed its name." Then she locked it away once more. Because the past, no matter how deeply buried, has a way of finding its own grave. Soft acoustic guitar begins, gentle and warm. Years passed quietly. Luca started school. Elena met people, smiled more often. One man, in particular, became part of that new rhythm. Thomas Reed, a literature professor from England who had moved to Tuscany to write. He was kind, patient, and loved her with the tenderness of someone who asked for nothing in return. They met in the clinic when he cut his hand on a broken bookcase. She stitched him up while he recited poetry to distract himself. "Do you always quote Shakespeare when you're bleeding?" she laughed. "Only when the nurse is beautiful," he replied. Their laughter filled the room like sunlight. For the first time, Elena let someone hold her without fear. Thomas never pressed about her past. He simply accepted that some stories begin long before you meet their characters. A year later, they married in a small church overlooking the hills. Luca carried the rings, smiling proudly. And though Elena's heart trembled as she said her vows, she looked at Thomas and thought, maybe this is what peace looks like. At night, when everyone slept, she still dreamed of another life, moonlight on the sea, the scent of smoke and rain, the sound of a piano echoing through an empty villa. But when she woke, she told herself, that man is gone. She didn't know that somewhere, across the border, the ghost she loved was learning to live again. Leonardo Moretti, now under the name Adriano Costa, had built a new identity. He lived in Switzerland for a time, working as a driver for a shipping company. No one recognized him. The beard, the scars, and the quiet demeanor turned him into just another man among thousands. But at night, he still wrote letters, hundreds of them, all beginning with the same word, Elena. He never sent a single one. On the 7th winter after he vanished, Leonardo returned to Italy. Not to Palermo, that life was dead, but to a city where no one would know Il Lupo. He wanted nothing but silence and perhaps forgiveness. But destiny has a cruel sense of timing. One morning at the local hospital, he was delivering a shipment of medical supplies. He walked through the corridors, paperwork in hand, and then froze. Through an open door he saw her, Elena. Her hair tied back, her hands gentle as she wrapped a bandage around a patient's arm. The world stopped. The air vanished. After 7 years of running, he was standing 5 feet away from the only person who had ever made him feel alive. And beside her, a boy. Silver eyes. Gray like his own. Leonardo staggered back, whispering, "My God, my son." He left before she could see him. Outside, the winter sun burned through the clouds, but he felt colder than he ever had. He sat in his truck, shaking, staring at the small pendant hanging from his mirror. The silver cross. The same one she had given him years ago. He touched it and whispered, "You kept your promise, Elena. You found peace. Now I must decide whether to destroy it or disappear again." That night, Leonardo couldn't sleep. He sat by the window of his small apartment, staring at the fog that rolled through the quiet Italian streets. His heart felt like it was breaking all over again. Only this time, it wasn't because he had lost her. It was because he had found her. And she was happy. He had imagined this moment 1,000 times, finding Elena, falling to his knees, telling her everything. But in his dreams, she was always waiting. In reality, she was no longer his to claim. 4 hours he watched the clock, every second louder than the last. At dawn he wrote another letter. Elena, I saw you today. You looked radiant. Peace suits you, as if God himself finally took pity and gave you light. The boy, he has my eyes. I wanted to run to you, to tell you everything, to hold you once more. But I couldn't. Because the man you see in front of you is no longer the one you loved. He is only a shadow, one that will always protect you, even from afar. He folded the paper, tucked it into an envelope, but never sealed it. The letter would join the hundreds of others. Love trapped in ink, hidden in drawers. Meanwhile, in Tuscany, Elena's life carried on as if nothing had changed. Luca played in the garden, chasing butterflies, his laughter echoing between the olive trees. Thomas sat on the porch, reading from his latest manuscript, smiling every time Elena looked at him. To anyone watching, it was a picture of quiet perfection. But inside her, something had shifted. That morning at the clinic, she had felt something, a tremor, a shadow. As if someone from her past had walked through the same air she breathed. She dismissed it as nostalgia, but the ache in her chest refused to fade. A few days later, the local hospital organized a charity event for the children's ward. Elena was in charge of the medical stand, and volunteers from several companies came to help. Among them was a quiet driver with dark hair and a neatly trimmed beard, Adriano Costa. He moved with the silence of someone who had lived 1,000 lives in the dark. Polite, calm, never intrusive. But when Elena looked at him for the first time, the world tilted. Her breath caught. Her heartbeat stuttered. For a moment, she couldn't move. Those eyes, cold and warm at the same time. She had seen them once, in dreams, in her son's reflection, in the life she buried long ago. Signora Romano? The man's voice broke her trance. Sorry, she said quickly, forcing a smile. You just reminded me of someone. He smiled faintly. That happens sometimes. Their hands brushed as he handed her a box of medical supplies. It was brief, but enough to bring back everything she had tried to forget. Her pulse quickened. She turned away, hiding her trembling hands. He watched her, too, pretending not to. And in that brief exchange, 7 years of silence cracked like glass. That night, Elena couldn't sleep either. She stood in front of the mirror, touching the pendant around her neck, a small silver cross. Her mind whispered what her heart already knew. It was him. But why was he here? After all this time, after the peace she had fought so hard to build, why now? She tried to convince herself it was coincidence. But destiny never believed in coincidence. The next morning, she found Lucas sitting at the kitchen table, drawing again, another wolf. Mama, look, he said proudly. He's not alone this time. I drew 2, one big, one small. They're walking together. She smiled softly, though her throat tightened. That's beautiful, amore. What are their names? The big one's Leo. The small one's Luca. Why Leo? Because I heard you say that name once, when you were dreaming. Her heart stopped. She hadn't said that name aloud in years. At the hospital, she saw him again. He was helping to move crates, quietly, keeping his distance, yet always near enough to see her. When she caught him looking, he turned away. But that small, guilty movement said more than words ever could. Finally, unable to bear the silence, she approached him after his shift. Adriano, she began softly. Yes, Signora Romano? Do I know you from somewhere? He hesitated. The world seemed to hold its breath. Maybe, in another life. Her eyes glistened. Yes, she whispered. That's what it feels like. Days turned into weeks. He came and went, always quiet, always kind. And slowly, the boundaries between past and present blurred. They talked sometimes, about books, about the sea, about faith. He told her he used to play piano. She smiled, hiding the storm inside her. And one evening, after the clinic closed, she stayed behind to finish paperwork. He was there too, returning some boxes. Rain began to fall outside, soft, rhythmic. He looked at her and said, "Do you still believe people can change?" "I believe love can," she answered. For the first time in 7 years, their eyes truly met, not as ghosts, but as two souls who had lived through fire and still dared to feel. Music swells, deep, emotional, full of memory and hope. As she left that night, she found something tucked under her car's wiper, an envelope, sealed but unaddressed. Her hands trembled as she opened it. "Elena, I told myself I would never disturb your peace. But seeing you, I realized peace without truth is only silence. The boy, our boy, deserves to know who he is. I ask for nothing, not forgiveness, not love. Only a moment to see him once, and then I will disappear forever. L." Tears blurred her vision. She pressed the letter to her chest and whispered, "You fool, you beautiful, broken fool." The storm outside grew louder, but inside her heart, something quiet unfolded, not pain, not fear, but acceptance. The morning after the storm, Tuscany smelled of wet earth and lavender. The sun rose slowly, washing the hills in pale gold, as if the world itself wanted to start over. But inside Elena's heart, there was no calm. All night she had stared at the letter, at his handwriting, familiar, trembling, alive. She had imagined his face, older now, carrying the weight of every choice he'd made. And one thought would not leave her. He saw Luca. The truth she had buried for 7 years had finally surfaced. And the man she had once loved more than her own soul was walking again beneath the same sky. She spent the day in silence. Thomas noticed her distance, the way her hands lingered on the table, the way she smiled without reaching her eyes. But he did. She rose, trembling but certain. It was time to face him. Not as the woman who once loved a mafia boss, but as the mother of his son. Meanwhile, Leonardo sat in his truck outside the clinic, the same silver cross dangling from the mirror. He had not left since dawn. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Luca's face, the boy's smile, his eyes, his way of holding his mother's hand. He had seen himself in every movement. It was unbearable and divine all at once. He whispered to the pendant, "If I see him just once, I can die at peace." He didn't expect that his wish would be granted sooner than he thought. The next afternoon, the hospital organized a small outdoor fair for the community. Families gathered, children played, laughter filled the air. And in the middle of it all, Luca, chasing a red balloon, his cheeks flushed with joy. Leonardo froze. He wanted to move, but his body refused. He watched the boy trip and fall, scraping his knee. Before anyone else could reach him, Leonardo did. He knelt down instinctively. Hey, it's okay. I've got you." His voice was low, gentle, the same voice that once soothed Elena on sleepless nights. Luca sniffled, looking up. Those gray eyes met their mirror. "It hurts," the boy whispered. "I know," Leonardo said softly, smiling faintly. "But pain means you're alive. That's good." He wiped the child's tears and helped him stand. "What's your name, little man?" "Luca Romano," the boy replied proudly. "Luca," Leonardo repeated, his voice breaking slightly. "That's a strong name." For a moment, time stopped. No past, no future, only a man and a boy, bound by something neither of them could name. Elena arrived seconds later. She froze when she saw them, Leonardo kneeling, Luca smiling. The scene looked like a memory she had dreamed 1,000 times but never dared to live. "Luca," she called, her voice trembling. The boy turned and ran to her, showing the bandaged knee. "The man helped me, Mama." Leonardo stood, his eyes locked on hers. Years of silence condensed into one look. No words. Only everything they had ever left unsaid. Later, when the fair was over and dusk had settled, Elena found him waiting near the parking lot. Neither spoke at first. The wind carried the scent of rosemary and rain. Finally, she said quietly, "You shouldn't have come." I know. Then why did you? He looked at her with eyes that still burned like storms. Because he exists. Her breath caught. He continued, voice trembling. I didn't come to destroy what you built. I just needed to see him. To know he was real. She looked away, blinking back tears. He's happy, Leo. He has a father. A good man who loves him. I know. And I thank him every day for being what I couldn't. She turned back to him. Then go. Leave before everything collapses. I will, he said softly. But promise me one thing. What? When he's old enough, tell him who I was. Not the monster, the man. The one who loved him before he was even born. Her lips trembled. You think I haven't already? And then she handed him something, the letter he had left on her car. You wrote that you'd disappear forever. Don't make promises you can't keep. He took the letter, unable to speak. Then she added, he deserves to know you once risked everything for love. Even if it means breaking my heart all over again. They stood in silence as the first stars appeared, two souls tied by a child who would never understand the weight of that moment. Finally, he whispered, Goodbye, Elena. Goodbye, Leo. He turned and walked away, the shadows swallowing him whole. But this time, he didn't vanish into guilt. He walked towards something that looked almost like redemption. That night, Elena tucked Luca into bed. Mama, he murmured sleepily. Yes, amore? That man today, he made me feel safe. Like I knew him. She kissed his forehead, whispering, That's because sometimes, love remembers what life forgets. And as she turned off the light, a tear fell, not of sadness, but of peace. It simply hides, in the arms of another life. Leonardo returned to Switzerland after his brief reunion with Luca and Elena. He kept the promise he had made to himself, to disappear from their lives, leaving behind only memory. But ghosts never rest. Back in Tuscany, life continued as if the storm had never passed. Elena tended to Luca. Thomas quietly observed the subtle tension she couldn't explain, and the small village breathed in its usual rhythm. Yet the letter Leonardo had left, the unspoken truth, had unsettled her. Her dreams were haunted now by a man with gray eyes and the weight of past sins. Every time Luca asked about his father, she felt the pull of the truth like a tide she could no longer hold back. Meanwhile, Leonardo faced the shadows of his past. Marco Santini had not been the only traitor. The Bellini family, believing Leonardo dead, had begun to take over territories he had once ruled. Every message, every threat, every whisper in the underworld reminded him that leaving Palermo had not erased the blood on his hands, only postponed it. He realized that peace carried a price. And the people he loved, Elena and Luca, would pay it if he did nothing. One night, he received a message. A single envelope slid under the door of the hotel where he was staying. Inside, a photograph. Luca, laughing, holding a toy wolf. And beneath it, in elegant handwriting, the child is precious. Protect him, or the world will destroy what you left behind. Leonardo's jaw tightened. For the first time in years, he understood that running away did not shield them. It only delayed the reckoning. Elena sensed it too. She noticed a black car parked near the clinic, a shadow following her path home, and unfamiliar faces in the village watching too closely. Thomas saw her anxiety, asked her questions she could not answer. And one evening she finally confessed, carefully, slowly, trembling with fear and love. Thomas, there's something you must know. Our son, he has a father. A man I cannot explain fully, a man from a life I cannot return to. I love you, but this truth, it might change everything. Thomas held her hands, steady and calm. Then we face it together, he said softly. Whatever comes. And in that promise, Elena felt the first warmth in weeks, the fragile thread of hope that would guide them through the coming storm. Meanwhile, Leonardo crossed back into Italy under another identity, moving quietly through the city streets. Every step reminded him of what he had lost, and what he could never reclaim. He reached Tuscany at dusk, just as Elena and Luca were leaving the clinic. He stayed hidden, watching her walk beside Thomas, the boy skipping ahead. The sight tore his heart open, not with jealousy, but with a pain too human to bear. Yet he could not intervene. Not yet. Later that night, Elena found a note slipped under her door. I come in peace. I only ask for one meeting. No harm. Only truth. L. She stared at it, heart hammering. Thomas read it over her shoulder. Do you want to see him? She hesitated. I need to. For Luca. That decision would change everything. Because some truths, once spoken, cannot be unspoken. The next day, Leonardo arrived at the vineyard where Luca played. He stayed hidden behind the olive trees, watching the child laugh, unaware of the storm approaching. Elena approached cautiously. He's right here, she whispered, nodding toward the boy. Leonardo stepped forward, his voice breaking for the first time in years. Luca, I'm your father. Luca froze, eyes wide. Father? He asked softly. Yes, Leonardo said, kneeling to meet his son's gaze. I am the man your mother loved before this life, before peace. But I am here now. To know you. To protect you. The boy hesitated. Then slowly he stepped forward, resting a small hand in Leonardo's. For a moment, the world held its breath. Elena watched from a distance, tears running silently down her cheeks. Thomas placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. It's not betrayal, he said softly. It's truth. And truth doesn't destroy love. It reshapes it. Leonardo and Luca spent hours together that day, sharing stories, exploring the garden, laughing like the world had begun again. But Leonardo's presence reminded them all, peace always carries a price. And for him, the reckoning with the past was still to come. Leonardo had hoped his past would remain buried in the ruins of Palermo. He had built a quiet life, a shadow of himself, living far from violence, from blood, from the life he once ruled. But shadows have a way of stretching farther than the living can see. It began with whispers in the city. A former associate recognized him at the docks in Genoa. A courier mentioned a man with gray eyes, a beard, and a cross hanging from his neck, a man who looked too much like the notorious Il Lupo. Within days, the Bellini family had learned that Leonardo Moretti was alive. And Marco Santini, the traitor he had once trusted, had risen in the chaos, claiming parts of his territory while the world assumed Leonardo dead. The empire he left behind was no longer stable. And those he loved, Elena and Luca, were now dangerously exposed. Back in Tuscany, Elena felt the first tendrils of unease. She noticed unfamiliar faces lingering near the clinic. Cars with tinted windows driving slowly down the street. Even the children in the village seemed quieter than usual, sensing the tension she refused to name aloud. That night, she called Leonardo's number, the only one she had, though she hesitated. Adriano, it's Elena. There was silence on the other end, heavy, loaded. Something is coming, she whispered. I know, he replied. And I will stop it. It was the first time they had spoken since the reunion at the vineyard. But words alone could not hold back what was coming. The following days were filled with subtle threats. A package arrived at the clinic, harmless at first glance, but inside it were old photos of Leonardo in Palermo, marked with red circles and numbers. Someone was watching. Someone knew. Elena refused to show Luca. But each time she looked at him, she feared for his innocence. The boy's laughter, once bright and pure, now carried the weight of eyes that didn't belong in a child's world. We can fight. Together. But it will never be easy. He nodded, the weight of years pressing down on him. Then I choose my heart. The choice was not simple. That night, Leonardo returned to the villa armed not with weapons, but with presence. He held Luca close, teaching him to defend himself, to understand courage without fear. He held Elena's hand, not just as a lover, but as a man who had been forged in fire and could now finally love without hiding. And together they planned. Every exit, every path, every possible threat was considered. Because love, Leonardo knew, was not soft. It was survival. Days passed, and life slowly resumed its fragile rhythm. Leonardo worked in the vineyard, quietly learning the names of every tree and vine. He laughed with Luca, taught him to play chess, and watched Elena with a devotion that no words could capture. At night, they would sit together under the stars. "Do you regret it?" Elena asked once. He shook his head. "Every scar, every loss, led me here. To you, to him, to this moment." And she realized, sometimes the heart must choose even when the world demands caution. But fate, as always, was never far behind. A letter arrived, stamped in red and black, bearing the Bellini insignia. Inside, only one line. "We know he is here. One more mistake and the boy dies. B." Leonardo read it carefully, then looked at Elena. "We have to fight. There is no other choice." Her hand found his. "Then we fight together." For the first time, their family, the one forged in pain, love, and survival, was truly united. The next morning, Leonardo sent Thomas away temporarily, ensuring the man he trusted most remained unharmed. He couldn't hide the truth from Elena any longer. The danger would come, and he would have to stand between it and Luca. Elena nodded, understanding fully. "I am not afraid," she said. "We will survive. Because we have to." And as Leonardo stepped out into the misty morning, ready to confront whatever shadows remained, he whispered, "For them, I will face the past, and nothing will take them from me again." The sun rose over Tuscany, golden and unyielding. The hills, the vineyards, the olive trees, everything seemed alive, watching, waiting. Leonardo stood at the edge of the village, eyes scanning the horizon. Every instinct told him the Bellini's shadow still lurked, but today he felt different. He was no longer running. He was no longer a ghost. Today he would reclaim the life he had fought so long to leave behind. Elena, Luca, and Thomas were inside the villa, preparing for a quiet day. Luca played with his toy wolf, unaware of the danger that had once been so close. Thomas watched Elena, reading her expression with quiet understanding. And then Leonardo returned, not hidden, not shadowed, but as himself. The confrontation came swiftly. The Bellini men arrived in force, expecting chaos. But Leonardo had anticipated every step. He moved like a storm, precise and lethal, neutralizing threats before they could touch his family. Each move was calculated, controlled. The predator who had once ruled Palermo now protecting what mattered most. By the time the sun reached its zenith, the Bellinis had retreated, their power diminished, their threat contained. Marco Santini's betrayal was finally avenged, not with vengeance alone, but with justice delivered from the hands of the man he had underestimated. When the dust settled, Leonardo returned to the villa. He found Elena in the garden, Luca running toward him with open arms. For the first time in years, he felt complete, not as Il Lupo, not as Adriano Costa, but as a father, as a man who had survived love, loss, and war. "Papa!" Luca shouted, throwing himself into Leonardo's embrace. He held his son tightly, feeling every heartbeat, every breath, proof that life could be reclaimed even after years of darkness. Elena approached, tears in her eyes, her hand brushing Leonardo's cheek. "Welcome home," she whispered. He smiled faintly, the weight of the past lifting for the first time. "I've never left," he said softly. "I just needed to find my way back." They stood together, watching Luca play in the sunlight, the villa alive with laughter and love. That evening, under a sky painted with stars, they sat together outside. Leonardo held Elena's hand, Luca asleep nearby, Thomas smiling quietly beside them. "Do you think it's really over?" Elena asked. "Yes," Leonardo replied. "Because this time, I will not let anything take you from me. No past, no shadows, no ghosts." She rested her head on his shoulder. "We have a life now," she said. "A life of our own." He kissed her forehead, softly, reverently. A life reclaimed. And finally, to peace. For Leonardo, peace was not the absence of danger, but the presence of love. For Elena, it was the ability to breathe again, knowing that the man she had loved and lost had returned, not as a shadow, but as the father of their child, the protector of their family, and the man she could finally trust with her heart. Luca stirred in his sleep, murmuring something about wolves and adventures. Leonardo smiled, whispering to him, "Yes, little wolf. The adventure is ours, together." The wind carried the scent of olive trees and lavender. The sun dipped low behind the hills, bathing everything in gold. And in that golden light, the past dissolved. The shadows faded. A life reclaimed, finally whole.